Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the BoxPod. I'm your host, Danny Howard from the Boxing Tribune, and it is great to be on the air with everybody. And whether you're at home or on the go, I hope this finds you well. Got a great show today. We got a lot of stuff going on in the sport of boxing, and we might as well just get right to it. We're going to be talking about Canelo Khan, Crawford Postol, those pesky but unfortunate Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor rumors, and then we're going to talk about the big one. The big one indeed. What I feel is the impending announcement of Saul Alvarez versus Gennady Golovkin and what we have to look forward to in the fall. But before we get into the particulars, let's go on ahead and talk about the news, talk about what we had going on in this week. Last weekend, as we already know, Amir Khan versus Canelo Alvarez happened. You know, when this fight happened, it came out of left field. Nobody was too sure about who Canelo Alvarez was going to fight, and at the same time, no one was entirely sure who was going to be a good enough opponent for a pay-per-view. There were talks that we would have seen Gabriel Rosado. There was talks that David Lemieux was going to be considered an opponent. And then when Amir Khan was selected as opponent, everyone was like, what the fuck is this all about? Khan jumped 2 weight divisions to fight Alvarez, and everybody thought it was going to be a blowout, and it ended up happening. But the big question was, did it sell? According to Kevin Aioli of Yahoo Sports, yes, it did. The fight actually did pretty well. Figures are ranging anywhere between 390 to up to 600,000 buys, whereas Kevin Aioli reports that the fight may have done somewhere in the middle, in the neighborhood of 460,000 pay-per-view buys. That is actually pretty impressive for this fight that a lot of people knew going into it was a mismatch. And the fight kind of played out the way everybody thought it would, but we'll get more into that fight later in the show. But again, Canelo Alvarez versus Amir Khan, a success at the box office for HBO and all parties involved. We go from one major fight to the next. This week we had the announcement that Vitor Postol and Terence Crawford will be unifying their WBO and WBC junior welterweight titles this summer. Everyone had a feeling that the fight was going to be announced, and it formally was. This is a very, very good fight. You have two very young and still very, very good, could potentially get better as their careers go along, junior welterweights, fighting for unification. It's the number 1 junior welterweight in the world, which would probably be Crawford in my opinion. And then you have Postol, who's the number 2. Those are interchangeable in my opinion. They're both very, very good fighters. The only complaint that I have about this fight, and it has nothing to do with the fighters or the fight itself, but the fact of the matter is that this is a fight that would get a lot of people into the sport and get the exposure to the general public who really needs a new type of face to look for. And this fight's going to be on pay-per-view. HBO's budget unfortunately doesn't allow this fight to be on their regular network. It's been a very, very rough patch for HBO over the past 16 months. But Crawford Postol will be on pay-per-view. Now, Bob Arum, who promotes both fighters, said that he will be happy with 100,000 buys. 100,000 buys is not very solid for a pay-per-view period. You know, in most cases, if a promoter had 100,000 buys on a pay-per-view, they wouldn't even announce the numbers. But Arum is hoping for 100,000 buys, and to be totally honest, that's going to be a bit of a stretch. As good as Crawford and Postol are, these guys don't have the recognition with the general public yet. They have not been built up towards this fight as a pay-per-view attraction, so this fight has no traction going in unless you have been following the sport. How this helps the casual fan, Crawford or Postol better, it doesn't. How it helps Crawford or Postol become bigger, be it a victory or anything else, it doesn't. It's going to be the instance where a tree falls in the woods if no one's around to see it did it happen. It's a tough pill to swallow. It's going to be a great fight, and I think it's going to be very fun to watch, but I don't know if a lot of people are going to see it. But again, Vitor Postol versus Terence Crawford is coming this July on HBO pay-per-view. 2 fights did happen, but the big story last weekend, unfortunately, I don't know where this came from and why it continues to go on, but The Sun, a British tabloid magazine along the lines of the Weekly World News, where you see Bat Boy, the Virgin Mary, predicting the end of the world and all this other cockamamie shit, reported a story that Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor, UFC's Conor McGregor, who have traded barbs at each other in the public over the past couple of months, are in negotiations for a boxing match later this year. And I don't know where people really get these stories. I mean, The Sun is a tabloid, but somehow there were several reputable agencies reporting that the fight was, reporting on this rumor. I mean, are you serious? That is the equivalent, again, of saying that Bat Boy has led police on an interstate car chase. Several counties are chasing the Bat Boy with the Virgin Mary in the front seat and Jimmy Hoffa, riding shotgun. And then you would see that on CNN. That's what I feel the equivalent is. You don't get reputable stories from a tabloid. But it was something that caught on, and a lot of people have been talking about it. Most recently, though, Dana White, the head of UFC, did come out and said, you know what? This fight is an impossibility. Conor McGregor, I can say this about UFC fighters, is that they don't have the luxury of competing outside the UFC. They cannot do that. And for Conor McGregor, despite the problem he's been having with Dana White, he goes into a boxing match against Floyd Mayweather, loses, and comes back to the UFC. That hurts the marketability of the brand, and Dana White is not an idiot. He knows that would be tremendously dangerous for his brand, and it would be a stupid fight. It would make a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. People would be knocking each other over to see the fight. But there's so much red tape that have to be crossed. The fact that the rumor has gotten this far is quite fascinating. But at the end of the day, it's not going to happen. Floyd Mayweather will be coming back, though. Last week we were hearing rumors that Mayweather had trademarked the terms TBE 50, possibly saying that he will be coming back for a 50th fight. Mayweather, of course, denied the rumors, but he's been so shifty, saying that he's getting offers, that he would come back for the right opponent, the right money. But Floyd Mayweather coming back to fight a 50th fight wouldn't surprise anybody. As a matter of fact, we're expecting an announcement any day now. But when it does happen, it's not going to be against Conor McGregor. So we would hope that sanity and, I guess, common sense rules the day, and that Floyd stays boxing or stays out of boxing and enjoys being retired, whereas Conor McGregor continues his mixed martial arts career. These guys shouldn't be fighting each other under any circumstances. So instead of going from a fantasy fight between two entirely different sports, let's talk about what might actually happen. And that is what I feel is an impending announcement that Triple G, Gennady Golovkin, and Saul Canelo Alvarez will be fighting sometime before the end of the year. After Canelo Khan, and when you consider how well the fight sold, and you look at the boxing landscape, barring just by default that Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather fight each other again in a rematch, Canelo versus Golovkin is the biggest fight that can be made in the sport. It would be the biggest fight that can be made between the two biggest fighters in the sport right now. And I do feel that the fight is going to happen. There have been talks, and I've heard talks as early as January, that Texas was a possible landing zone for this fight, that there will be big money involved, and that concessions are going to be made, potentially by the Golovkin camp, to make the fight happen by the end of the year. The WBC, after Khan's win Khan's loss against Alvarez, had said that they are going to mandatorily enforce the Canelo camp and the Triple G camp to start beginning negotiations within 15 days. Originally, I thought that when the fight would happen, it would happen sometime next year. At the rate Gennady Golovkin has been fighting, he would have either broken Bernard Hopkins' record for middleweight title defenses or be right on the cusp. And Canelo would be the right guy to fight either before he hits the 20 or when he hits the 20. And at that time, it would be better for Golden Boy, too, because they would be catching Golovkin in his mid-30s at this point. And Canelo only seems to be getting more built into the middleweight division. I thought it would have been a safer choice for them and still as big of a fight then as it would be if they were to make it happen any sooner. But to be honest, all roads lead to Alvarez Golovkin, and there is not a lot of avenues that Canelo Alvarez can take to continue being on pay-per-view and making the money he's making, and for Gennady Golovkin to make the money that he wants to make, and to get the maximum amount of compensation for his work. This is a fight that has to happen. Going back to Canelo Khan real quick, you look at why that fight was made. The fight wasn't made to do anything else but to give Canelo a great payday, at the same time to also pump the fact that he is the A-side talent. When Golovkin and him do sit down, that's a reality that the Team Golovkin is going to have to figure out. They have stood very firm on their demands in terms of wanting to take the fight at 160 and wanting, their fair share. They've made it very clear that they intend on, standing up for themselves in regards to negotiations and will not do things if certain concessions are made to them. The thing is that Gennady Golovkin and his team have no ground to stand on in regards to whatever negotiations will happen in that fight. They say they want the fight to happen at the middleweight limit. Canelo Alvarez is the one that's going to determine if the fight happens at 160 or not. Now, I think the fight may very well happen at 160 because if you see Canelo, how he looked physically in the weigh-ins for Khan and in the weigh-in for Miguel Cotto last year, both fights, he was coming in at 155. He doesn't really look that strong. He looks off, as if he is kind of like restricting himself just to make that weight limit. Canelo cannot continue to go down to 155 or below at this point. He is too physically big to continue doing that. It may hamper him going forward with his career. So a fight with Golovkin may very well take place at 160 pounds. Or it could take place maybe even at a catch weight at 158 pounds, 159 pounds. Who knows? But if Gennady Golovkin really wants to fight Canelo Alvarez, there is going to have to be something he's going to have to give up. And I think it may very well be the weight. I think Golovkin may have to come down a few pounds to meet him in the middle. Bernard Hopkins fought Oscar De La Hoya at 157 pounds. And he did that because Hopkins was very clearly the B-side. Hopkins was not a popular fighter in terms of generating revenue for HBO. Oscar was the superstar. Canelo Alvarez is the superstar. More people paid to watch a fight that they knew what the outcome was going to be when it was announced, all the way up to when it actually happened, in regards to Alvarez Khan, than they did when a fight was being marketed as competitive, in regards to Gennady Golovkin, was being pushed as competitive, and ultimately was a wipeout. And I'm